The storm had passed, but the house was still wrapped in its quiet aftermath. Emily woke to the faint glow of sunlight sneaking through her curtains, stretching across her sheets like the tender hand of a new beginning. For a long while, she simply lay there, staring at the ceiling, her heart still restless from the words Daniel had spoken the night before. "I'd never stop feeling something for you." The confession had echoed through her chest long after the living room had gone silent. She had tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the honesty in his eyes, the vulnerability in his voice. Now, in the stillness of morning, reality pressed in. It wasn't just a dream. He was in her house, on her couch, and her heart was beating faster than it had in years. Emily pushed back the covers and padded softly across the floor. When she opened her bedroom door, the faint smell of coffee reached her, surprising her. She stepped into the hallway, her breath catching when she saw him. Daniel was in her kitchen. He stood by the counter, barefoot, his damp jacket from the night before draped neatly over a chair. His hair was tousled, falling across his forehead, and he wore the same white t-shirt, now slightly wrinkled. The sight was so domestic, so ordinary that it felt extraordinary. "Morning," he said, glancing up with a shy smile. His voice was rough with sleep, and it stirred something deep inside her. Emily crossed her arms loosely, trying to appear casual. "You made coffee. I found your machine," Daniel replied, lifting a mug in her direction. "I hope that's okay. I figured it was the least I could do after, well, showing up out of nowhere." She took the mug, her fingers brushing his briefly. The warmth of the ceramic couldn't compare to the spark that shot through her skin at his touch. She quickly pulled back, murmuring, "Thank you." For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the rainwater dripping outside. Emily leaned against the counter, sipping her coffee, while Daniel stood across from her, hands in his pockets, watching her with an intensity that made her heart ache. Finally, she set the mug down. "Daniel, about last night." He straightened, slightly, his jaw tightening. "I know," he said softly. "I said too much. I shouldn't have, no." Emily's voice was firm, though her hands trembled against the counter. "Don't apologize. You were honest. And I—" She faltered, her throat tight. "I don't know what to do with that honesty." Daniel's eyes softened. "Then let me make it simple." He stepped closer, the distance shrinking until Emily could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I'm not here to confuse you, Emily. I'm not here to make your life harder. I needed you to know how I feel. And if you don't feel the same, I'll walk out that door right now." The weight of his words pressed against her chest. Walk out. She tried to picture him leaving, but the thought sent a sharp pain through her. She didn't want him to go. She realized, with a jolt of fear and wonder, that she wanted him to stay. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, her silence stretched. Daniel's face fell slightly. He nodded once, as though preparing himself for disappointment. He stepped back, reaching for his jacket. "Wait," Emily whispered. Her voice was so soft it barely reached him, but he stopped, turning back. Her eyes glistened as she forced the words out. "I don't want you to leave." The relief that flickered across his face was almost too much to bear. He set his jacket back down, his shoulders dropping as if a weight had been lifted. Emily swallowed hard. "I don't know what this means. You're younger. You're my best friend's brother. This could complicate everything. But—" She paused, her chest tightening as the truth formed on her lips. "But last night, when you said what you did, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time." Daniel closed the space between them in 2 slow steps. Then let's not overthink it, he murmured. Let's just start here. Today. With whatever this is. Her heart thundered in her chest as he reached for her hand. His touch was gentle, tentative, like he was giving her every chance to pull away. But she didn't. Instead, her fingers curled into his, holding on as though she'd been waiting years for this. For the first time in so long, Emily allowed herself to smile, not the polite smile she wore for colleagues, not the forced smile. She offered friends to reassure them she was fine, but a real, vulnerable smile. Outside, the storm clouds began to part, letting the sun stretch across the city. Inside, Emily realized that by opening her door to him last night, she had unknowingly opened her heart too. But just as she was beginning to lean into the warmth of this unexpected connection, the sharp trill of her phone broke the moment. Reached for it, frowning when she saw the name flashing on the screen. It was Claire, Daniel's sister, her best friend. Emily's heart lurched. She glanced at Daniel, whose expression mirrored her own shock. Neither of them spoke as the phone continued to ring, its sound slicing through the fragile silence between them. Emily's hand trembled over the phone. Answering it could change everything. And in that instant, she knew, whatever came next, their lives would never be the same. Morning light always had a way of softening things, of making the world appear calmer than it truly was. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving behind a grey sky and streets glistening with puddles. Drops of water clung to the leaves. Outside Emily's window, catching the muted glow of daylight. But Emily didn't feel calm. She lay in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with pieces of last night. The way Daniel's voice had carried quiet confessions. The way his hand had brushed hers. The way his eyes had held hers in the dark. It was just a conversation. She told herself. Nothing more. 2 people sharing stories during a storm. She repeated the thought like a mantra, but her chest betrayed her, fluttering at the memory of his smile, tightening at the way he had said he used to admire her. Finally, she sat up, running her hands over her face. She could smell coffee drifting from the kitchen, rich and comforting, and her stomach twisted with nerves. He was awake. He was still here, and she wasn't sure how to face him in the daylight. Slipping into a soft sweater and jeans, she padded quietly down the hallway. There he was standing at the counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs as though he belonged there. The sight made her pause. His dark hair was still slightly tousled. His white t-shirt clung to him in a way that reminded her far too much of the man he had become, not the boy she remembered. He turned when he heard her footsteps, a smile flickering across his face. Morning. Emily forced her lips into a smile. Morning. I hope you don't mind. I found the coffee and figured it was better than waiting for you to wake up, Daniel said, handing her a mug. His voice was casual, but there was something in his eyes that wasn't casual at all. Double quotes. No, that's fine, Emily replied, taking the mug carefully, her fingers brushing his for the briefest second. That tiny contact was enough to remind her of the spark from last night, and she quickly pulled away, wrapping both hands around the warmth of the cup. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, steam rising between them. The silence wasn't heavy, but it wasn't easy either. Daniel broke it first. Thanks again, Emily, for letting me crash here. I really didn't know where else to go. You don't have to thank me, she said quickly. It was nothing. That's what friends are for. The word hung in the air like a stone. Friends. Daniel's eyes flickered, something unreadable in them. He nodded slowly, but she could see the muscle in his jaw tighten. Emily sipped her coffee, staring into the dark liquid. She needed to draw the line. Whatever had passed between them last night, those lingering touches, those confessions, it was dangerous. She was older. She was his sister's friend. And she had already lived through heartbreak once. She couldn't afford to make the same mistakes again. But when she looked up, Daniel's gaze was on her, steady and intent. "What?" she asked softly, her voice trembling under his stare. He hesitated, then set his mug down. "Last night, it wasn't nothing, Emily." Her breath caught. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice low, careful. "I meant what I said. About how I used to look at you. About how you were different. You still are. And sitting here now, after all these years, it feels like..." He paused, searching for words. "Like I finally found something I didn't even know I was missing." Emily's throat tightened. She shook her head, her voice breaking. "Daniel, you can't say things like that." "Why not?" His words were soft, but there was strength in them, because... She looked away, staring at the rain-streaked window. "Because I'm older than you. Because you're Claire's brother. Because I'm not..." She faltered, the tears threatening to rise. "I'm not someone who should be starting over again." Daniel's expression softened, but his voice didn't waver. "Emily, none of that matters. Not to me." Her chest ached with the truth she didn't want to admit. It did matter to her, to the world outside their little bubble of a kitchen. And yet, inside that bubble, all she could feel was the pull of his words, the sincerity in his eyes, the part of her that wanted to believe him. She pushed back her chair abruptly, standing. "I think it's better if we don't go there. You should get your car sorted and head back to Seattle." Daniel rose too, watching her with quiet intensity. For a moment, it seemed like he wanted to argue, to close the space between them, to prove something. But instead, he nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "Okay," he said softly. "If that's what you want." Emily's heart twisted. She wanted to say it wasn't what she wanted. It was what she had to want. But the words never came. Daniel gathered his bag later that afternoon. Standing by the door, he looked at her. One last time. "Emily," he said, his voice low and steady. "I won't pretend last night didn't mean something. Not to me. And I don't think it was nothing for you either. But I respect what you're asking." Her throat tightened, her hand gripping the doorframe for balance. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that it was nothing. But the lie wouldn't form, so she just nodded, whispering, "Goodbye, Daniel." He gave her one last searching look before stepping out into the grey afternoon. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Emily in the silence she had once thought she wanted. But it wasn't the same silence anymore. It was heavier, louder. A silence that carried his laughter, his words, his eyes. And as Emily leaned back against the door, tears slipping down her cheeks, she realized the truth she had been. Running from it hadn't been nothing. It had been everything. The rain had not stopped. It tapped against the windows like an old, persistent visitor, making the night stretch longer than usual. Emily lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the storm's rhythm. She turned from one side too, the other, pressing her pillow against her cheek, but sleep refused to come. Her thoughts kept drifting to the man in her living room, Daniel. It was strange how easily his presence unsettled her carefully built peace. Just hours earlier, her house had been a quiet retreat, the same as every Friday night. Now, with him just a few steps away on her couch, the air felt charged, fragile, alive. Emily sighed, sitting up. The red numbers on the bedside clock read 12:18 a.m. She slipped into her robe, the soft fabric brushing her skin, and padded quietly down the hallway toward the kitchen. Maybe a glass of water or another glass of wine would help calm her restless thoughts. But as she turned the corner, she froze. Daniel wasn't asleep. He was sitting on the couch in the dark, the faint glow of the streetlight outside tracing his profile. His elbows rested on his knees, hands clasped loosely, as though he had been deep in thought for a long time. His gaze wasn't fixed on anything in particular, just the ceiling, or maybe something far beyond it. Emily hesitated, caught between retreating and announcing her presence. But the creak of the floor betrayed her, and Daniel's head turned. Slightly, can't sleep. His voice was quiet, carrying that low, husky warmth that made her chest tighten. She offered a small, almost embarrassed smile. You too? He gave a soft laugh, shaking his head. Nope. Too many thoughts running wild, and I guess too much coffee earlier. Emily stepped further into the room, tucking her robe tighter around her. I was going to get some water. Want one? Daniel nodded, his smile faint but grateful. Sure. In the kitchen, Emily poured 2 glasses, her hands trembling slightly as she felt the weight of the silence between them. When she returned, she handed him the glass. Their fingers brushed just for a second, but it was enough to send a ripple through her chest. She quickly settled into the armchair across from him, her legs tucked under her. The rain filled the silence, steady and constant, almost like background music. You know, Daniel began, his voice low. It's funny how life turns out. When I was a kid, I used to think I had everything figured out. Like, by now I'd have this perfect life. He gave a short, humorless laugh. But turns out, nothing's as simple as we imagined. Emily tilted her head, studying him. His words carried weight, not just casual late-night chatter. What happened? She asked softly. Daniel leaned back into the couch, his gaze lifting to the ceiling again. Seattle happened. Work happened. I thought moving there would mean opportunity, success, excitement. And yeah, the job pays well, but it feels like I'm working my life away for people who don't even know my name. I come home to an empty apartment. No one's waiting for me. No one even notices when I'm gone. There was a rawness in his voice, a quiet confession that surprised her. This wasn't the confident young man she remembered from years ago. Always joking, always charming. This was someone stripped down, vulnerable. Emily's heart softened. She understood more than she wanted to admit. I get that, she murmured. After my divorce, the house felt so quiet, like the silence itself was judging me. I'd wake up and realize no one was making coffee in the kitchen. No one was calling out my name. It's strange how you can be surrounded by people all day but still feel invisible. Daniel's eyes found hers in the dim light. For a moment they just looked at each other, the rain echoing around them. And in that look, something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared loneliness. Emily cleared her throat, suddenly self-conscious. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't apologize, Daniel interrupted gently. It's nice, actually, to hear someone say it out loud. Makes me feel less crazy. A small smile tugged at her lips. You were always a little crazy. He laughed, the sound low and warm. You still remember that? How could I forget? You and Claire used to drive me insane when you were kids. Always sneaking into the kitchen for extra cookies, or making up excuses to hang around whenever I visited. Daniel smirked, leaning forward slightly. What if I told you it wasn't the cookies I was after? Emily blinked, caught off guard. Her stomach fluttered, but she quickly disguised it with a roll of her eyes. "You were 13, Daniel. Don't tell me you were chasing after me back then." His smirk softened into something more serious, his gaze steady. "Maybe not chasing, but watching, admiring. Even then, you felt different to me." The words lingered in the air, heavier than the storm outside. Emily's breath caught, her heart thudding harder than she wanted to admit. She looked away, focusing on her glass of water. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "Why not?" His tone was gentle, not teasing. "It's the truth." Emily's pulse quickened. She wasn't sure if it was the lateness of the hour, the intimacy of the storm, or the quiet way he spoke. But suddenly, the walls she had built around her heart felt thin, fragile. Their conversation drifted after that, weaving between memories of the past and confessions about the present. They laughed about childhood stories, shared frustrations about work, even debated movies and books. The hours slipped by without either of them noticing. And yet, beneath every word, there was something else, an undercurrent they both felt but didn't name. At one point, as Emily leaned forward to hand him the glass, her fingers brushed his again. Only this time, neither of them pulled away quickly. The touch lingered, small, fleeting, but enough to set her heart racing. Heat rushed to her cheeks, and she quickly retracted her hand. "You should get some rest," she murmured, her voice unsteady. Daniel studied her for a moment as though he wanted to say something more, but instead he simply nodded. "Yeah, you're right." Emily stood, retreating toward her bedroom. But as she reached the hallway, she paused. Her heart felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. Restless and awake. Back in bed, she stared at the ceiling again, listening to the rain. But now, her thoughts weren't empty. They were full of his laughter, his honesty, his eyes that seemed to see right through her. And for the first time since her divorce, Emily's heart whispered something dangerous, something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in. What if? Emily Walker had always thought of Friday nights as her sanctuary. After a long week of teaching high school English in Portland, she looked forward to her quiet routine, curling up on the sofa with a blanket, a glass of red wine, and a book she had promised herself she would finally finish. Her small home, with its soft yellow walls and shelves filled with novels, was her safe haven from the noise and demands of the world outside. That evening, the rain had been falling for hours, drumming steadily against the windows. Portland rain was nothing new, but tonight it felt heavier, more persistent, like the sky was determined to wash everything clean. The world outside was grey and drenched, while inside her house the warm lamplight glowed, creating a cocoon of stillness around her. Emily sighed, closing the book she hadn't managed to focus on. The truth was, she felt restless. Loneliness had been her silent companion since her divorce 2 years earlier. Friends and family encouraged her to put herself out there again, but the thought of opening her heart terrified her. She told herself she was fine, that solitude wasn't the same as sadness. But some nights, like this one, the silence felt too loud. It was in that silence that the knock came. At first, she thought she had imagined it. The sound was faint beneath the rain, almost uncertain. But then it came again, louder this time, quick and deliberate. Emily's heart skipped. Could be at her door at this hour. She set her wineglass down and walked carefully across the hardwood floor. As she pulled back the curtain and peered through the small window beside the door, her breath caught. Standing there in the rain was Daniel Miller. For a moment, Emily didn't move. She hadn't seen him in years. Her best friend Claire's younger brother, the boy who used to follow her around at family gatherings and barbecues, the teenager who had once blushed every time she looked at him. Except he wasn't a boy anymore. Daniel was 28 now, if she remembered correctly 6 years younger than her. His tall frame was soaked, his jacket clinging to his broad shoulders. His dark hair dripped rainwater across his forehead, and his green eyes, always so striking, looked both exhausted and vulnerable. Emily's first instinct was hesitation. Why was he here? Why now? She slowly opened the door, a rush of cold, damp air filling the warm entryway. Daniel. Her voice was soft, laced with both surprise and caution. He gave a faint, apologetic smile. Hey, Emily. I'm sorry to just show up like this. His voice carried that familiar husky warmth, only deeper now with age. My car broke down on the way back from a trip. He exhaled, glancing away for a second before meeting her eyes again. I didn't know where else to go. For a long second, Emily simply stared at him, the past rushing back in fragments. Memories of summers when Daniel had tagged along with his sister, of the way he used to look at her like she was someone extraordinary. And now here he was, no longer the awkward younger brother, but a man standing at her doorstep in the pouring rain. She realized she hadn't answered. Oh, of course. Come in, she said quickly, stepping aside. You're soaked through. Daniel stepped inside, the sound of rain muffling behind him as the door closed. His presence seemed to fill the small space, carrying with it both familiarity and strangeness. He placed his bag on the floor and rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Thanks, he murmured. I didn't mean to bother you. I just didn't have many options. Emily shook her head, brushing damp strands of hair from her face. It's no bother. You look like you've had a rough night. He gave a low chuckle, though his eyes were tired. You could say that. She fetched him a towel from the hallway closet, watching as he ran it over his hair and face. For a brief moment, she caught herself noticing the sharpness of his jawline, the way his damp shirt clung to his chest. Heat rose to her cheeks, and she quickly looked away, silently scolding herself. This was Daniel, Claire's younger brother. She couldn't be thinking that way. You can put your things down here, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The couch is yours tonight. Daniel's smile was small but grateful. Thank you, Emily. Really. The sound of her name in his voice was different than she remembered, gentler, more intimate. She forced a smile and nodded as she walked him through the living room, showing him where he could settle. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken in a way she didn't quite understand. She told herself it was just the surprise of seeing someone from her past, the disruption of her quiet routine. But deep down, something else stirred, something she hadn't expected. By the time she retreated to her bedroom, Emily found herself leaning against the closed door, trying to steady her breath. She could hear the faint creak of the couch as Daniel settled in, the soft rustle of the blanket she had given him. She told herself she would sleep, that he would be gone by morning and life would return to normal. But as she climbed into bed and listened to the rain, Emily couldn't shake the image of his eyes, the way they had looked at her, not as a boy remembering an old crush, but as a man carrying unspoken words. For the first time in years, her quiet little home felt different. Not empty, not silent, alive. And as she drifted toward restless sleep, she knew something had shifted. What Emily didn't realize was that letting him sleep on the couch would change far more than her night. It would change the very course of her heart.